So, have you ever seen this happen? You're watching a real expert, maybe someone with like decades of experience,
Uh-huh.
and they pause mid-task and then they Google something that seems, incredibly basic.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Like
Yeah,
a senior developer suddenly looking up how to center a div.
exactly. Or like basic Python list comprehension syntax,
Uh,
stuff you learned early on.
right. And you might think, wait, how can they forget that?
If you've had that thought, you are definitely not alone.
Hmm.
So today we're doing a deep dive to, well, kind of debunk this myth of the all-knowing
Yeah,
developer
let's unpack that.
and reveal what's really going on with expert programming, because it's not about memorization. In fact, we're going to argue that knowing how to Google effectively, that's actually a senior skill.
That's a really interesting way to frame it. And our mission today is basically to explore that idea. Drawings from a great article. It's called Why Senior Developers Google Basic Syntax from the FAUN developer community. And we're going to pull out the key insights, the nuggets of knowledge that really redefine what expertise looks like. Not just in code, maybe, but in any complex field you might be in.
Right, because this applies broadly.
Exactly. We'll look at how this myth, the all-knowing one, feeds into imposter syndrome,
Oh, definitely.
puts unnecessary pressure on people, and what senior pros actually hold on to in their heads, what they prioritize remembering.
Okay, let's dig into the myth itself first, because it really is powerful, isn't it?
It is.
This idea that hitting senior means you've just, I don't know, downloaded the entire internet's worth of syntax and libraries into your brain.
Like it's all perfectly indexed and instantly retrievable.
Yeah. And you never, ever need to look things up again. And the article points out how damaging that is, especially for junior folks.
Right? They look up and see seniors maybe not Googling or hiding it.
And think, wow, I'm constantly on Stack Overflow. I'll never be like that.
Or for the mid-level developers, just feeling this intense pressure. I have to memorize everything to get promoted. It's kind of paralyzing.
But the truth, as the article suggests, is pretty much the opposite, isn't it?
Almost exactly the inverse, yeah. Senior developers are considered experts because they're good at figuring out how to tackle problems,
Okay.
how to find the solutions they need quickly and efficiently, and maybe most importantly, how to keep learning constantly. Their value isn't just raw recall.
It's not about the size of their mental database.
Not at all. It's about strategic thinking, navigating complexity, their whole problem-solving approach.
And the article has some great examples of this, these senior moments, as it calls them, which are actually pretty relatable.
Yeah, they make it tangible.
Like having to Google the syntax for the AWS CLI describe instances command. You just blank on the right flag for filtering. Happens all the time.
Oh, yeah. Or looking up in Jinx reverse proxy config again, even though you probably set it up like hundreds of times.
I know I've done that. Or spent like half an hour debugging something ridiculous.
Only to find it was a typo or a missing semicolon.
Exactly. It feels silly, but it happens.
The article mentions other common ones too, like Kubernetes port forwarding syntax. Is it kubectl port forward pod or SVC? That little detail can slip your mind.
Right.
Or someone debugging Terraform for ages because they forgot a basic provider block.
Ouch. Been there.
Or needing to look up how to write a custom Jenkins step for, say, AWS Secrets Manager when building a CI/CD pipeline. These aren't failures.
So these moments, these senior moments, they're not actually signs of weakness. They're pointing to something deeper.
Exactly. That comfort level with not knowing or maybe just not remembering right now is actually a sign of seniority.
How so?
It shows you're confident in your ability to find the answer efficiently. You're not embarrassed by the gap.
So it's not about proving you already know it.
Right. It's about demonstrating you can know it or find it when needed. It's capability and resourcefulness over just rote recall.
That reframes it completely. So if it's not about memorizing syntax, what are senior developers focusing on? What are they keeping in their heads?
Great question. Because they are retaining valuable knowledge, just not necessarily low-level implementation details.
Okay.
They're holding on to like high-level mental models, how systems work together. They focus on patterns and, importantly, anti-patterns things to avoid.
So conceptual understanding.
Yes. And problem-solving approaches. Frameworks for thinking through issues rather than specific memorized solutions. And crucially, they know where to look for information.
And how to judge it, right?
Exactly. How to evaluate if a solution they find is actually good, if it fits the context, if it's current. That critical evaluation is key.
I love the analogy the article uses for this. It says, think of a senior dev's brain not as a library crammed with every book,
Right.
but more like a map.
I like that.
They might not remember every single street name or building, but they know the layout, the districts, the best ways to get from A to B. They know how to navigate the landscape to find what they need.
That's a really powerful way to put it. A map is flexible, too. If the landscape changes, a map helps you adapt. Library of outdated books, not so much.
So if it's not about memory capacity, what really separates a junior from a senior developer in their day-to-day approach?
Well, it often comes down to focus and the kinds of questions they ask.
Yep.
Juniors, understandably, tend to focus on finding solutions. How do I do X? They're learning specific tools, specific technologies.
Getting things working.
Exactly. Whereas seniors tend to focus more on understanding the problem first. They're more likely to ask, should we even be doing X in the first place? What are the alternatives? What are the long-term trade-offs?
The why behind the what's.
Precisely. Seniors are trying to grasp the underlying principles that make technologies work, not just the commands for one specific tool.
And does that extend to how they feel about their own knowledge?
I think so. A
Yeah.
junior might memorize syntax to feel competent, to prove they belong.
Right, battling that imposter syndrome.
Whereas a senior feels competent, despite not having everything memorized. Their confidence comes from their process, their experience, their ability to figure things out.
So Googling feels different too.
Totally. For a junior, hitting Google can sometimes feel like admitting defeat. I should have known this.
Yeah, a sign of weakness.
But a senior sees Googling as just another tool in the belt, an essential one even, a perfectly normal part of the workflow.
And how they Google is different too, right? Juniors might look for the exact code snippet.
While seniors are often searching for broader approaches, design patterns, discussions of trade-offs, conceptual explanations, they're mining for understanding, not just answers.
And maybe the biggest difference is that fear factor. Juniors might worry about looking foolish if they admit they don't know something.
Yeah, that pressure is real. Seniors generally are much more comfortable saying, I don't know off the top of my head, but let's find out.
That comfort seems key.
It's huge.
Yeah.
That confidence to leverage external knowledge is really a hallmark of expertise.
Okay, so if seniors are Googling frequently but differently, what makes their Googling a skill? Because the article really pushes this idea. It's not a crutch, it's a competency.
It absolutely is a skill. Think about it. Knowing the right terms to search for, especially for complex or obscure problems, that's hard.
True. Garbage in, garbage out with search engines.
Exactly. And then sifting through the results, being able to quickly evaluate if a solution is actually appropriate for your specific situation, not just some generic example.
Yeah, judging the quality in context.
Recognizing outdated advice or solutions that might be technically correct but inefficient or insecure, that takes experience. Seniors are also better at extracting the underlying principle from an example, rather than just copy-pasting code.
So they can adapt it.
Right. And sometimes they apply solutions or ideas found in one context to a completely different, seemingly unrelated problem. That's creative problem solving, enabled by effective information retrieval.
And there's actually science behind why this is efficient, isn't there? Like cognitive load.
Absolutely. Cognitive load theory basically says our working memory, the mental scratch pad we use for active thinking, is pretty limited.
Okay.
So if you try to cram it full of every single syntax detail, every API parameter, you don't have much bandwidth left for the actual hard thinking.
Like designing the system or figuring out the complex logic.
Exactly. Experts use techniques like chunking, grouping related bits of info into larger concepts to manage this, and they strategically externalize information.
Meaning they let Google or documentation hold on to the readily available stuff.
Precisely. They offload the low-value, easily retrievable facts to free up their own mental RAM for higher-level problem-solving, creativity, and critical thinking.
It's not lazy, it's resource optimization for your brain.
That's a perfect way to put it. Optimizing cognitive resources.
So if you're a senior developer listening to this, maybe one of the best things you can do for your junior colleagues is just be open about Googling.
Oh, absolutely. Model the behavior. Show them it's normal, it's expected, it's part of the job.
I remember starting out feeling so much pressure not to look things up, especially if someone was watching. It creates such unnecessary anxiety.
It really does. And seniors can actively help juniors develop this skill. Show them how you search. Talk through why you chose certain keywords.
Demonstrate evaluating the results.
Yes. Teach them how to spot outdated answers, how to cross-reference information, how to adapt a solution from a blog post to your specific code base.
And reinforce that idea about when to memorize versus when to look up.
Definitely. Help them see that expertise is more about judgment, architectural thinking, and problem-solving strategies than just having a perfect memory.
The article even mentions seniors deliberately Googling in front of juniors.
Yeah, explicitly demonstrating. See, I don't have this memorized either. The important part is knowing how to find it and use it. It normalizes the process.
This whole thing really maps onto the typical developer journey, doesn't it?
It really does. You often see juniors trying, bless their hearts, to memorize everything, and they get totally overwhelmed.
Been there.
Then, as mid-level, you start realizing you can't memorize everything, so you begin to prioritize. But maybe you still feel a bit insecure about looking things up.
Still fighting that imposter feeling.
Right. Then, as a senior, you become much more strategic. You consciously decide what core concepts are worth embedding deeply.
The foundational stuff.
And you become very comfortable, very efficient at looking up the rest. It's just part of your standard operating procedure.
And then beyond senior, like principal or architect level.
The focus shifts even higher, much more towards principles, systems thinking, trade-offs, high-level design, decision-making. The specific implementation details become less central to their role.
So there's this dawning realization across a career that pure memorization, it's kind of overrated.
Massively overrated. Knowing how to find, evaluate, and apply information is far more valuable in the long run.
But okay, to be balanced, there are things worth committing to memory, right? It's not like you should remember nothing.
Oh, for sure. It's about being strategic. You definitely want to internalize the core principles and paradigms of your main programming languages. Not every function, but how the language thinks.
Got it. What else?
Common design patterns and best practices relevant to your specific domain or industry. That saves you from reinventing the wheel, often badly.
Makes sense.
Performance characteristics of frequently used data structures. Knowing when to use a list versus a dictionary versus a set that kind of fundamental knowledge impacts efficiency directly.
Right, that's crucial.
And of course, the key aspects of the architecture of the systems you work on daily, you need that high-level map in your head.
So there's a practical rule of thumb, maybe? The article suggested one.
Yeah, it's a good one. If you find yourself Googling the exact same specific thing multiple times within, say, a week,
Yeah.
maybe that little piece is worth the effort to memorize.
Okay, that seems reasonable.
But otherwise, let Google, let the docs, let your tools be your extended brain. Focus your precious mental energy on the harder problems.
So wrapping this up, the core insight we've unpacked today is that expertise, especially in tech, but probably everywhere, it's not really about being a walking encyclopedia.
Not at all.
Yeah.
It's much more about being an effective problem solver. It's about strategic information retrieval, knowing how to find what you need when you need it.
And knowing how to learn continuously.
Exactly. It's optimizing your cognitive load so you can tackle complexity, not just recall facts.
So for everyone listening, the next time you see someone who's clearly at the top of their game, a senior dev, a seasoned professional in any field, pausing to Google something that seems basic,
Don't judge.
don't think less of them. Instead, maybe recognize that you're seeing a pro using one of their most powerful tools, efficient information access. Google or whatever resource they're using, it's a vital part of their expert toolkit.
It's a sign of confidence in their process, not a lack of knowledge.
So here's a final thought to leave you with. What really stands out to you from this deep dive? Think about your own work, your own field, even your hobbies. Where might you be putting pressure on yourself to memorize things when maybe you could be focusing on understanding principles and getting really good at leveraging external tools? How does reframing Googling as a skill, not a weakness, change your perception of what it truly means to be an expert?